and welcome to San Francisco Bay Area Moms. And for our readers and followers, Dr. Gorin is co-director of the USC Diabetes and Obesity Research Institute. And they just published 2 studies about how type 2 diabetes has doubled in kids during COVID-19. At least now for the first 18 to 19 months, but now we know things are still a little iffy, but we also know kids are going back to school. So we'll have to, that's something I would like to address. So we're here today to kind of talk about the study and the role parents can play in the prevention of type 2 diabetes. So welcome, Dr. Gorin. Thank you for being here. And
my pleasure.
What are some of the major discoveries from the research that you conducted?
You're just asking specifically about the type 2 project data?
Yes, and the other one as well. Like, what are some of the, especially those COVID-19 related things that have kind of stuck out?
Yeah, so that was from my colleagues at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and there's been a couple of other reports as well from around the country. I don't think they've made it into publications yet, but they're certainly indicating an increase in occurrence of type 2 diabetes in children and severity as well of type 2 diabetes. So that paper from my colleagues at Children's Hospital showed an increased incidence of diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a complication of type 2 diabetes. So data is showing, just like in adults also we've seen this in other publications, that COVID is increasing the incidence of type 2 diabetes and the severity, as well as the severity of response to COVID itself.
Oh, that's interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about that with the specific relation to COVID.
Yeah, there's a couple of reports, mostly from adults. I don't know if this has been shown in children in terms of a formal publication, but the data suggests that pre-existing hyperglycemia, which is something that would be associated with type 2 diabetes, pre-existing hyperglycemia was associated with increased severity of response to COVID-19 infection. Okay. So more complications, more severe complications.
So, well, and that's good data to have, even if it is, primarily mainly done with adult symptoms, because parents need to really be modeling these behaviors for their children. And if they find themselves, struggling with type 2 diabetes, or at least increased risks for it, there's something we can all do. And that's kind of one of the other things I really wanted to talk about is, what are some basic things that we as parents can do to help reduce the sugar intake in our children and for ourselves as well?
Yeah, so I mean, this is not really type 2 diabetes is obviously a major health problem. Its prevalence is increasing, but for most kids and most moms everywhere, even without type 2 diabetes, we know that sugar consumption is increasing and it's affecting kids. And so kids are consuming much more sugar than prior generations. The kids are surrounded by sugar and different types of sugar, which may not cause actual type 2 diabetes, but it's certainly speeding up that process, as well as fatty liver disease and all kinds of other issues like learning problems, inflammation problems like asthma and skin problems. But anyway, so we wrote the book Sugarproof, which was published last year, and the first half of the book is the science of how sugar affects children and why children are more severely affected by sugar. Mm-hmm. And then the second half comes back to your question, what can moms do? The second half is all about what moms can do. And the idea is not to say that moms need to eliminate all sugar because that's not going to work. Sugar-proof means raising kids who are resilient and protected from the high sugar food environment, not by not consuming it, but just learning to self-regulate, learning to adapt in different situations so that you're gradually reducing sugar in the home, more aware of hidden sugars and so on.
Right.
So that's what Sugarproof is all about, is just everyday tips for making, not just kids, but also as adults and as parents. We all need to be reminded of the effects of sugar and gradually try to reduce it because it's just everywhere.
Right.
80% of foods targeted towards children have added sugars, and 70% of all processed foods have some type of added sugar.
Right. So what are some of the big culprits? Well, you mentioned processed food, but what are some other things that you have found that have been surprising for parents to discover has such high levels of sugar in it?
Yeah, well, one of the main culprits is not as a surprise as soda, sugary beverages.
Sure.
So,
Yep.
but the big surprise is juice. So a lot of parents don't realize that. So juice can have just as much sugar as soda, but it has this healthy halo around it because it's fruit juice. It's derived from fruit. But the problem, what many parents don't realize is that once you take that juice out of the fruit and liberate it, the sugars become very concentrated, and most juices eliminate the fiber and eliminate many of the other phytonutrients. So juice is really problematic. It's highly concentrated sugars, and it's usually higher in fructose, which is a sugar that's more problematic. I mean, most parents probably know about high fructose corn syrup and know to look out for it. But fruit juice, it has actually got more fructose than high fructose corn syrup. It's just called fruit juice, so it sounds good. But
right, it does. Yeah, it has fruit in the name. Well, I think that's great just to be able to point that out. You know, I think as parents, we think we're doing our best, but you know, to have just to have the awareness of it and to make a conscious effort to read labels and to do that, again, benefits our children. But if they see us doing that as well, then they can have an awareness about making choices and making proper choices.
And that's what it's all about. So I think the more you can get your kids involved, and obviously that'll depend on what age they are, but get your kids involved so they know what they're eating. The other culprit that is hidden sugars, and that's something your kids might enjoy getting involved with. It could be a little detective game involved with that.
That's great. Yeah.
Sugar has more than 200 different names, and food companies have gotten pretty smart at disguising them on food labels. So you have to kind of do some detective work sometimes and look at the ingredient list and figure out what's on there.
That's a great idea. Help your kids become sugar detectives and to look at that. And that is one of the things that was recommended. You know, we have been, you know, at home with our children. And I think a lot of parents and families have, you know, kind of taken advantage of that time to, you know, cook more at home, find ways to engage their children. And that, you know, and that's one thing I think you mentioned, also, you know, creating a menu, doing the shopping, helping prepare food. What other benefits does that have in all of this?
You mean benefits of getting the kids involved?
Yeah. And in a larger maybe goal of helping, you know, down the road, reducing type 2 diabetes. So what is that?
Well, I think it's important because it's for kids to make a change, and even for adults to make a change. I think what's important is kind of triggering that internal motivation. So getting them involved is going to also involve finding out why they're interested or why they want to make a change. So I don't think it's we're all parents, so we all know what works and what doesn't work, and it's not going to work to show up on Monday morning and say, okay, kids, no more sugar.
Right.
That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Right. We've all been in that situation. And so our hardest job in Sugarproof was kind of finding the balance, because we do want to try and reduce sugar, but we also don't want to just make sugar the villain, and we don't want moms to feel guilty because sugar, there's a place for sugar and sweet treats for kids. And I think that's important not to lose sight of that. And food is also about enjoyment and celebration. And I think we want to maximize that whilst also trying to not overdo it on sugar. So there's ways we can just kind of gradually cut back. And I think getting kids involved in decision-making about what to buy, what to cook, what to eat, getting them involved in the kitchen is only going to help them internally feel part of the process. And it's a chance to bond over something, a chance to get them interested and not just kind of take for granted what we're putting in our kids' bodies.
Right. So I know as we get ready, and many of us, to send our children back off to school, we're restocking our pantries, getting ready to, have those convenient, snacks and things that we put in kids' lunches.
Yeah.
What kinds of changes can we do there so that we're, setting them up for success at school, by having the right kinds of foods available to them?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways to do that. We write a lot about it in the book. We post very frequently about this kind of stuff on our Instagram. So, obviously we know not all parents are going to make all their food every day and make all their snacks. We do have some suggestions for making snacks, which you might want to do some of the time. But in terms of prepackaged stuff for convenience, you want to avoid stuff that are very processed with multiple ingredients, with added sugars, anything you're not sure about the name of, or anything there's more than 5 ingredients is probably not a good idea. Fruit snacks is one typical example of a culprit where, there's no fruit in fruit snacks. So you're better off just chopping up a piece of fruit, or even buying frozen fruit and putting a few blocks of frozen mango in the lunchbox, than buying fruit snacks. Bars, like energy bars, are often very high in added sugar. We have a recipe in the book for energy bars or energy bites. But that doesn't mean to say you have to make it all the time. Again, look for brands that have a decent amount of healthy ingredients. Look out for sweeteners. Sweeteners are another problem. A lot of brands will say no added sugar. And no added sugar could mean there's sucralose or ACE-K or some other chemical sweetener in there. Even the natural sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit, they're not great. We don't really recommend those for kids, and neither does the American Academy of Pediatrics. But that's a whole other conversation,
a
whole other question. So I don't want to I'm sure maybe we can talk about that too. But basically, just look for the more natural types of ingredients. In this particular situation, organic is pretty good, because organic means there's no nasty chemicals in there as well.
Okay, that actually was going to be one of my next questions is, I think we find, especially in California and here in the Bay Area, we'd like to think that we're aware of that and, organic and making those choices. But that's a good reminder too, that, organic is good for other healthy reasons, as well as just having, been pesticide free, but in the whole process of food. What about the role that that schools play? Do you find, I know the last year has been different, year and a half, but even previously, many schools, don't allow, your child to bring in, cupcakes to celebrate birthdays, or back several years ago, getting rid of vending machines and things like that. Do you think that schools are doing their part to help this as well? Or what else could they do?
I think it varies a lot from school to school and school district to school district. I think there's eliminating vending machines was fairly helpful because vending machines tended to be loaded with mostly soda and high sugar snacks. Eliminating cupcakes seems a little draconian, a little kind of too strict to me. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that there's a place in our culture for celebration, and sweet treats plays a part in that. I think there's alternatives to that. For example, in the book, we have recipes for cupcakes that have no added sugar, or muffins or cake. So there's ways to do it that yield a much healthier product that's not as high in sugar. So I don't think the answer is say, oh, you can't bring cupcakes for your kid's birthday. I think the answer is to try and educate teachers and parents and families everywhere that cupcakes doesn't mean that you have to go and buy ultra processed, high sugared cupcakes. There's other ways to do those types of fun treats in a healthy way, without added sugars or with minimal added sugars.
Right. What about the argument that it's more expensive to eat healthier? You hear that a lot, that families who are on more strict incomes, may be the ones who are buying more processed, snacky kinds of foods. What do you say to that, or how can we help demystify that?
Yeah, I think it is it is a myth, and I've heard it before, but I don't think it has to be that way. I think there's, in fact, I'm working with a colleague. We're doing a study right now. We're about to launch a study, which is to develop a weekly grocery bag for families on SNAP that meets the U.S. dietary guidelines and the sustainability index. And in theory, we've shown on paper that it can be done in terms of meal planning for a family of four on that budget. So I think it's definitely possible. I think it's a bit of a myth that healthier food is more expensive. Healthier food does tend to be more expensive, but that doesn't mean to say there aren't lower cost varieties that are just as healthy. So for example, I'm just thinking of a breakfast cereal, for example, that you can buy, very fancy, high-end, quote unquote, healthy breakfast cereal for $5-6 a box. But there are other options that can be just as good for half the price. So I think it really depends on what you're looking at. And there's certainly plenty of examples of healthy meals. I think availability is an issue for many people, for many families. For example, fresh fruits and vegetables not being broadly available. But I think the disparities in this area are huge, and I think that's something that you're getting at here. Regardless of the cost of a healthy diet, we do know that some of these issues that we're talking about, excess weight gain, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, they affect lower income and other communities like Hispanics and Black populations to a much higher degree than whites. So that's something we're also very interested in our research, is trying to understand not just there's the biological source of that disparity, but also the social aspect of it and the availability of healthy foods. And even if it is available, then we're dealing with marketing and advertising of foods as well. So there's a lot of factors at play here.
Well, I know people talk a lot about food deserts and yeah, neighborhoods that, it's not convenient to go to, so you go to your local, corner gas station even, and they may have some fresh fruit, but the prices are marked up, and then that, so it really is an education.
I think it's changing a little bit. I think large companies like Target, for example, and other Costco and Walmarts are beginning to stock much better produce, for example, and a healthier variety of fruits. I think it's changing a little bit. Gas stations are gas stations. There's not much we can do about that. But
that's right.
But food deserts are real, and it's a big problem for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's great to see even my family recently moved from the Northern Virginia, DC area to here to California about 3 years ago. And even back then, or back there, the ability for farmers markets to be able to take food stamps, kind of that, or have a SNAP cards here. And so it's really great to see the community, from that aspect of the community taking a stand and providing that as an option.
I think that's been a big development as well. Farmers markets accepting those forms of payments. Schools are a problem because they're subject to the policies laid down by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Farm Bill and all that. I mean, I think there's very deep-rooted problems there that are yet to be solved. That's also an important issue. But I think, from my perspective, what I focused on is just trying to educate people, families all over about trying to be more aware of this, because not to make moms feel guilty that they've done a bad job, but we can't look back, but we can be more informed and look forward. So I think the more we can be informed and more we can empower families and inform families about the pros and cons, I think that, to me, is the way to go forward, because information and knowledge is key.
And that an all or nothing mentality is not helpful because it does, you set yourself up for failure. And I think we find that in many things that we do, exercise, I'm gonna, New Year's resolutions and all of those kinds of,
absolutely,
you're gonna do it, and it doesn't happen.
You don't have to be perfect. I wrote the book on Sugarproof. I've done 30 years of research on sugar. I have 2 kids, 2 teenagers, and I'm not saying they're like sugar addicts or anything, but we have, they have their fair share. They have a fairly good idea of what's a healthy amount, and they have a fair idea of how to self-regulate that. But there's no shortage of outings to coffee shops and so on, and ice cream parlors. It's not. This is not an all or nothing thing. Again, we're not saying you have to and should. In fact, I think that's not a favorable outcome, because that will inevitably backfire sooner or later. And so we don't want to be pushing complete avoidance at this stage.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we talk about, or I think we hit on a lot of good points. I think your book, that's great that it has recipes in it, so parents can look at that and
we have so in the book we have, like I said, the first bit is about the science of why kids are more at risk, and there is that to keep in mind, that kids are more susceptible to the adverse effects of sugar. And then the second part is the how-to. We didn't talk about breakfast. Breakfast is pretty critical for kids, for younger kids in particular. You want to try and reduce as much as possible sugar in breakfast meals, replacing it with fiber and protein where possible. And we talk in the book a lot about that and how to achieve that, and very simple simple tricks and hacks. And then we have the recipes as well
Yeah.
in there. So check
Yeah,
it
well,
out.
and having that breakfast, just sets them up for success for the day, can make you feel good. As a parent, you're starting the day out right, and you're doing what you can. And I love that you said, we're not perfect, but we can make better choices. And
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And not every choice has to be perfect either, or,
Yep.
but I think the more we can make, the more better choices we can make, you just have to like tilt it a little bit each day. And I think that's what we're saying here, is that it's not like you can just start a new day tomorrow and eliminate sugar. We do have one program in here, the 7-day no added sugar challenge.
Oh,
where
okay.
we do so it's a family exercise just to go for a week without added sugar, and it's a learning experience more than anything.
Oh, I bet.
Just to and the point is to inform yourself about what the sources of added sugars are, and where they're hiding, where they're coming from, and just see if you feel better or feel different, or notice that your kids are different without added sugar. And I think it's basically a reset. It's a reboot. It's basically a Control-Alt-Delete on your computer systems, just to refresh those taste buds, because they do get overwhelmed. And sugar, in my opinion, the sweet taste overwhelms the other taste preferences, so you lose sight of those other ones. So when you take it out, the other ones can kind of waken up.
Sure.
And you're more likely to taste other flavors. Right.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And I think especially having parents and children notice in a challenge like that, the feeling part, and how you feel after, and kind of making that mind body connection can, be a great driving factor to keep up the good work, and to keep, educating yourself and making the right choices, taking 2 products and picking, the better one. And why is that? So.
Yeah, I think the awareness is key. The old saying, the adage is, you are what you eat, but we talk about you feel what you eat. So I think getting kids to be more mindful about how different things are making them feel different.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
If your kids are rolling around the floor an hour after breakfast, there's probably a reason, and it might be something to do with what they had for breakfast.
Right. And just because, you do that and you send them to school, you might not see it, but you're not doing the teachers in the school, any favors either. And that's
right.
Yeah, because not only behavior, but then that impacts their learning, and it's just it's going to be a struggle for the day for them, for everybody.
And we have a lot of families that we talk about in Sugarproof who have that direct experience, and we were able to fix that, and families saw a noticeable difference, and teachers were reporting kids falling asleep, for example, mid-morning, and after this 7-day challenge, they were much more alert and more focused during the day.
Yeah, because they were crashing from
they were crashing.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Doctor. And
My pleasure.
We will make sure to check out the post, so you've got a link to the book for more resources. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for your interest, and thanks for bringing this forward to your community.
Yeah.